and from following on from the last one, if you've not seen it, it's worth catching up with. So just a little bit about our project. So you're hearing us live from the University of Salford. We are one of the partners involved in the catalysing change in the chemical sciences. There are many of us involved in this project, and I'll introduce you to those shortly. So what is Missing Elements? Well, our key take-home messages is that systemic racism persists across the UK chemical sciences pipeline, and these inequalities are structural, and it's not about ability or ambition. And the cost is borne by the whole discipline. So bringing us to our project, where we are catalysing change in chemical sciences. So this is a collaborative EDI research project which aims to address systemic racism in chemistry in the UK. And we seek to improve recruitment, representation, retention and progression of Black minority ethnic chemists in research and related careers. Our project, as I said, has many partners and many people involved, some of whom you will meet and many in the background too. But we are working together at the University of Salford, the University of Kent, the University of York. And we're bringing you a project which offers student employment and work experience, bursaries for research projects, mentoring, community building events and networking, decolonising the curriculum events, and research showcase event, which will be coming this year. And of course, for all of you that have joined us today, these fantastic Catalyst conversations, which are webinars, and we have watch parties going on. None of this is possible without all the student partners involved. This is made in the whole led by our student partners. And we're just these faces that come on and take some of the glory, but we're really proud of what they've done and what they're achieving. So we'll move on to the schedule for our Catalyst conversations. As I said, this is the second in a series of 7 conversations, and today we'll be joined by Willian and Caroline from the University of Salford, where we're going to be discussing belonging and self-belief. So no more shrinking, overcoming imposter syndrome and owning your space. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce both of these speakers. So I've worked with Dr. Caroline Topham since I've started at the University of Salford, and she is still a biomedical science lecturer, but she's also a practicing counselling and psychotherapist. So she'll be exploring how imposter syndrome affects scientists at the intersection of research, culture, and mental well-being. Second, we'll have Dr. Willian de Silveira. He's a lecturer in medical genomics and an adjunct lecturer at the International Space University, or former ESA Spaceomics lead and NASA STAR alumnus. So he's got some really exciting insights which he'll bring and speak to you about today. I invite you all to ask as many questions as you want, pop them into the chat as we go, but we will be dealing with the questions and answers at the end of the 2 presentations. So we're not going to interrupt the flow of the presentations. We'll deal with them all together at the end. So we'll hopefully have a really lovely conversation. Do feel free to engage with our Padlet and the topics explored. So you can scan the QR codes here and add your thoughts to our discussion board, and that would be great. And if you require any further details of our sessions, do contact Yara. And we've got Caroline who's joined us now. So thank you so much, Caroline. I'm going to hand over to you and Willian as you present. Thank you so much. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Such a professional introduction. I feel like I'm on the telly. Yeah, it's lovely to be here. I'm really pleased that you asked me, and I'm really happy that this work is being done. It's really important work. And I hope that I can offer you something useful today, something to think about. So what am I going to talk about today? So I'm going to start by telling you a bit about me, my personal experience of the imposter phenomenon. So I'm not calling it a syndrome. I'll tell you a bit why. I'll tell you about that later on. It's something I've experienced myself. still impacts me to this day, but I have a way of living with it now, and I've made friends with it as such. So I'll tell you about me, a bit about my professional journey as well. Then I'll talk a bit about the real self versus the external self. So this is a psychotherapeutic concept, which is kind of the reason why we experience psychological distress for many people, is that gap between what's inside and what we feel we must portray on the outside is quite large. I'll talk a bit about the imposter phenomenon in terms of its definition, and then we're going to spend a bit of time thinking about, do I have it? So things that you should think about to figure out, is this me? Is this actually my environment that I'm in? And then I'm going to finish with some useful resources to get you started with supporting yourself if you think that the imposter phenomenon and imposter feelings are something that are impacting you. I'm not going to go into loads of detail about what to do because there's loads of fantastic resources available online. So I've kind of directed you to a couple of those to get started with. Feels like it's more important today to talk about how do I determine if this is something that I need to really be paying attention to or not. And then we're going to hand over to Willian, who's got a fantastic story to tell you about his experience with what he calls the mongrel complex, and his experience of living with the contradiction of being a successful Brazilian. And he's going to explain more about what that means later on. So I'm going to talk for about 15-20 minutes, then we'll hand over to Willian, then there's going to be questions at the end, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. So about me. So I'm going to start off with a diagram. So I've got then and now on the screen at the moment. So I'm going to show you a couple of lines that illustrate two different parts of me from back then, the start of my higher education career, to now at the bottom of the screen. So from the top to the bottom, we're moving through time. And on the left-hand side, I'm going to show you this blue line, which illustrates my professional self. On the right-hand side, this purple line illustrates my personal self. And you can see back then, back when I was doing my undergraduate degree in 1999. I wish it was 2000 something. The gap between my personal self and my professional self felt very large. So that's why the two lines are shown as being quite far apart here. And what you often hear in these kinds of professional presentations is what's shown on the left-hand side. So this is kind of like a professional CV, if you like. So I did my degree. I then worked as a technician. I worked as a scientist. Then I went back to university. I did my PhD. Then I did a postdoc, lectureship, became a program leader. It's this kind of conveyor belt of, and then I did this, and then I did this, and it all looks very successful on paper. And I have had a lot of success in my academic career. What you don't often see is what is on the right-hand side of the screen, which is how much personal difficulty I was experiencing alongside achieving all of these things. So my early career was heavily impacted by anxiety, and imposter feelings were a big part of that, especially when I was doing my PhD and before that as well. So that lived experience of like what it means to live on a daily basis with the kind of anxiety that imposter feelings can bring about, I do understand what that's like. I'm not an expert in imposter syndrome or the imposter phenomenon professionally. Maybe that's my imposter feelings that feel necessary to declare that to you this morning. But I am interested in it. I am a mental health professional. I do work with clients that are dealing with imposter feelings. So yeah, hopefully there'll be something useful for you in this today. So what feels important to stress here is that towards the bottom of this diagram, you can see the lines come closer together. And there's like a bit of a messy phase when we entered lockdown, when my personal and professional selves just became completely entangled, and we were working, 14-hour days trying to deliver online courses when we'd never taught online before, and everyone was working from their bedroom. I'm sure you can relate to that kind of confusion of where the professional and personal selves ended during that unique time. But where I feel I am now at the bottom is that I'm a lecturer, I'm a psychotherapist, and lots of other things as well in my personal life. But I feel like my personal self and my professional self are now quite close together. They're different and they're boundaried, but I feel like I can be authentic in my professional life. And as a result, I'm a lot more peaceful. I'm more contented in my professional life. So that's my journey. So the reason I've decided to show it as a diagram in this way is because one of the core principles of psychotherapy is that when there's a big gap between our internal self, our real self, and our external self, so what we feel we must be on the outside, the gap is where symptoms emerge. So on the left here, I've said when the real self and the external self are out of contact with each other, symptoms emerge. And I've listed some here: performance anxiety, imposter feelings, depression, intrusive thoughts, but this list goes on and on and on. Self-sabotaging behaviors, self-harming behaviors, suicidal ideation, whatever psychological distress you're experiencing can often be linked back to a disconnect from parts of yourself. So when the real self and the external self can be brought back into contact, so they can become close and congruent, individuals can experience peace and also reach their full potential, which is exactly what we want for you as research students and young professionals, to reach your full potential. And for some people, they need some help to bring those parts of themselves together. So I guess this is a bit of an exploration today into, do I need some help with this, or actually am I having a valid set of experiences and emotional responses to the situation that I'm in? So let's explore that. So what is imposter syndrome? And I've crossed out the word syndrome because it's not actually a syndrome. So it's not actually something which would be diagnosed by a psychiatrist or a mental health professional. It tends to be referred to as the imposter phenomenon. So it's a psychological phenomenon rather than a diagnosable disorder. However, imposter feelings can be a symptom of a psychiatric condition. For example, generalized anxiety disorder or other anxiety-based psychiatric diagnoses. But in and of itself, it's not a syndrome as such. But it's very real and it's very common, actually. And it's defined by individuals who struggle to internalize their successes and achievements despite objective evidence of the success. So even in the face of all the things that you have achieved on paper, they don't feel like your achievements. So these people often have persistent self-doubt and fear being exposed as a fraud. So this sense of like pretending, getting away with it, pulling the wool over people's eyes, I'm not supposed to be here, these kinds of thoughts. So a key thing to note with imposter feelings is that individuals that experience this don't attribute their performance to their actual success and competence. Instead, they attribute it to good luck or help from others or other external factors. So there's a scale at the bottom here, and you can kind of see imposter feelings as being on this scale. So in the middle, there's kind of a healthy and appropriate confidence and self-esteem. So someone who's like, yes, I know that I'm competent in these areas. I know I've achieved these things. I'm confident at doing X, Y, and Z. On the right-hand side, there's someone who's perhaps gone in the opposite direction that has an inflated sense of self and an overconfidence. And this is problematic in the sense of this person's perhaps not in contact with reality and they're not aware of the limitations of their capacity and abilities. But that's a whole conversation for another day. We're interested in what's happening on the left-hand side here, which is people that have imposter feelings and this very low self-esteem that's not actually representative of the reality. So they're not able to absorb and internalize their successes. So some questions you can ask yourself to think about: do I have imposter phenomenon? Is this alive in me? So are these imposter feelings, have they been around for a long time, or are you in a period of growth? So if you're perhaps in the first year of a degree or a new job, perhaps it's normal that you feel like this. It's probably healthy to have an element of like, oh, I'm not sure I'm equipped enough for this. Can I do this? You know, you're in a period of growth and you're learning. So that's something to consider. You know, is this actually a realistic response to what I'm going through right now? However, if you felt this way for a very long time, if that feeling doesn't go away, then perhaps there is something more going on for you there. Do my achievements look good on paper but don't really feel like mine? Do I ever feel like I've done enough work, or am I always feeling like I've got to feed the beast? Work, work, work. Perfectionism and overworking are two big things that come up for people with imposter feelings. Do I ever feel pleased with myself? So do I ever feel satisfied with my work and the standard of it? Am I worried I'm going to be found out as not being competent enough? So if these questions are resonating with you, then perhaps there's something for you to explore here around imposter feelings. But it's really important before you start diagnosing yourself with, you know, oh, this is me, I need to work on myself. Think about, is it me or is it my environment? So a sense of belonging is extremely important to humans. We're hardwired to need to belong. We believe it's linked to our survival. Evolutionarily speaking, it was. To be excluded was to die. And that's the kind of evolutionary heritage that we live with in our nervous systems today. So belonging is incredibly important, but there are lots of reasons why people feel like they don't belong, and they're not all due to the imposter phenomenon. So it's interesting to know that the imposter phenomenon was first described in the 70s, and this was following the study of women entering academic workplaces. And there were some very real reasons for women to feel othered in these male-dominated spaces at that time. So think about, for yourself, what might be happening in here, what's mine, what's my psychological process that I'm bringing to this, and what's actually the reality of my workplace. So what external factors may contribute to your imposter feelings? We know that systemic racism exists. That's the whole reason that this seminar series is here. So how might systemic oppression affect your sense of belonging in the workplace? And are your imposter feelings a result of actually having low levels of external validation because yourself, your characteristics, your communication style is not considered to be welcome, is not celebrated, is not accounted for in your workplace? And I think there's a video that I've linked to at the end by an American psychologist called Raquel Martin, and she talks about how in her client base, and she works with a lot of Black clients, actually she doesn't meet people with imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome. She meets people who are dealing with the consequences of working in a workplace that is unwelcoming to them. So if you consider all this and you decide that your imposter feelings are actually not a true reflection of your situation, or perhaps there's a combination. Yes, there are external aspects that make sense to me, but there's something more going on for me there, then there may be a different root cause. Something to think about, and something that you would explore with a therapist if that was something that you wanted to do. What negative beliefs does your real internal, most personal self have that may be the root cause of your anxiety? And how hard is your external self having to work to deny this belief? So overworking and being perfect is a way that people cope with having these negative self-beliefs. So some core beliefs I often meet in my therapy room, which can be overcome in time with therapy. You know, people fundamentally sometimes have beliefs: I'm stupid, I'm not good enough, I'm only okay if I'm perfect. A lot of people come to therapy with the sense that they're somehow a bad person. And through the process of exploring where these came about, people actually learn that these are false beliefs. We make decisions about ourselves based on how we experience life in our childhoods, whether that's how we experience the world, how we're treated, and we make mistakes. We decide things that are actually not true. So in the scale here, I've shown in the middle, for the people with imposter phenomenon, the reality is distorted, and they're not actually able to see that they are competent and they are capable and they have achieved these things. They deny reality in order to hold on to the core belief, the negative self-belief that they're somehow not good enough. So if this is you, then perhaps working with a counsellor or therapist would be a useful way forward. So some useful resources for you before I hand over to Willian. So this is the short YouTube video. It's only about 8 minutes long. It's really worth a watch about, the current understanding of the imposter phenomenon doesn't account for the reality of being in an unwelcoming environment as a member of a minoritized group, whether that's a racialized group or because of queer identity or because of disability. So yeah, make sure that's on your radar as you're thinking about this phenomenon in yourself. Places to begin your research on overcoming imposter feelings. There's just a couple of blog posts there, one from the British Psychological Society and one from an American professor in psychology. And then if you think that counselling or psychotherapy might be the way forward for you, then there's some links there to get you started. So your university counselling service could be a good place to start, but it might be that if this is a really entrenched negative self-belief for you, then some kind of longer term psychotherapy might be what you need. And you can have a look at the other 3 links there to get you started. And thank you for your attention. I'm going to hand over to Willian now.
Great. Thanks so much, Caroline. That was absolutely fabulous. And I have so many questions, which we'll bring up at the end. So prepare yourself. Willian, over to you. I can't wait to hear your take on belonging and self-belief. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you and good morning, everyone. I think this is a good transition to make from what Caroline was saying to more like a personal experience that I had. So I'm dividing this. Oh, sorry. Just a little more about me before I start, because part of it is necessary for me to show off. Okay, sorry for that, but if you're talking about yourself, not believing on yourself, showing that sometimes you should is interesting. So who I am right now. So I'm a lecturer in medical genomics in the University of Salford, something that I'm very happy to be. I'm an adjunct professor at the International Space University. Yes, there is a space university. I was a mentor of the ESA Omics Hackathon. I was quite happy to tell you that the groups I was mentoring, 2 of them won first and second place. And if only one of them won, I would say maybe I don't have that impact on it. But first and second, I'll take some of the credit. And I'm also continuing to be a member of the analysis working group of GenLab supported by NASA. So I have been working with the European Space Agency since I moved here 6 years ago. I've been working with NASA for 8 or 9 years at this point. I'm working with the International Space University for 5-6 years at this point too. I'm from here in the University of Salford for the last 2 years. And my main success so far has been this cover of the Cell journal in November 2020, where I was very humble and proud to be the first author. So I'm talking a little about my experience, how until I arrived to that and what happened after. So I'm dividing this in 2 parts. First, a little early experience, what we call it in English, the mongrel syndrome. And then what happened after I had the greatest success of my research career so far. First, what is the mongrel complex? So it's something that we call in Brazil, literally, the street dog complex. There was a Brazilian author from 1958. He's a very famous Brazilian author in Brazil. That he says that Brazil have a complex of inferiority when they look at outside of the world. It's something he defined as a narcissist in reverse. The idea that we Brazilians don't feel that we should be proud of our own history. And of course, this is wrong. Of course, we should, with one of the 10 biggest economies of the world, like a lot of big things. We have a huge territory where a lot of other countries around South America broke down in smaller ones. We made a lot and we did a lot. But we still have problems having proud of our own achievements, like as a country. Part of it is of course your good and old racism. So one thing that I'm not proud of Brazilian history is that we were the last one in the whole world to abolish slavery. And we still have like a huge majority of African descended population in Brazil. And they're not a minority, they are a majority, but they're still not well represented in place of powers or economically speaking or educationally speaking. In my class when I was in uni, and it was in a very good university back in Brazil, we have not even a single Black person. And one of the things we have there is, and it's very well represented by this painter called the Hans Redemption. Let's not start too much on what this religious figure is the point that we have the process of whitening on Brazil, at least the trying of whitening. Well, when Brazil abolished slavery, one of the things the Brazilian government tried to do when they did was to bring a lot of Europeans from Europe to improve the population and to make Brazil more white. And something that's very common there is you have a family situation like that. Have one generation when you have people of Black heritage, like Black people, and then like the mixed races on the second, third generation, and then this mixed races like got married with more Europeans, and then what you have is that the family that was majority Black and 2 generations ago, you start to have like a white child, and this is the history of my family. See, my grandma is more or less of this color. No, she's more or less brown. And she married my grandpa, and my grandpa was genetically Italian. He was already second generation in Brazil, but they have married in the community. So this happened in my family. And there's a totally different story to tell when I discovered that I was not white when I left Brazil. But that's a different story. So this whole story that Brazil wants to be white, at least the little Brazil want to be white, but they see themselves as this mixing as a bad thing. And we're still like overcoming that. But again, a very complex story of why this is a feeling in Brazil. But we do have some other metrics that help people not to be that confident. One of them is about Nobel Prizes. And if you see like the top 10 Nobel Prizes here, you see that USA in first, UK second, congratulations, UK. And you see Brazil, how many Nobel Prizes we have, and we have 0. And just want to make the point that Argentina have 5. And if you know anything about Brazil and Argentina, our relations with them is more or less the relation between England and France. And we don't like to talk much about it. But the point is that there is a cultural point that we as a country have problems in being proud of ourselves. We look outside and looks much better. We look to the other people's education, other people's achievements, and to think, who we are with that. And for me, when I started to think about going outside of Brazil, I was not that confident. I was kind of okay, let's see. I was happy to try and see what I could learn. But I was not that confident of what was going to be there. I was a good student. I was praised by my peers. What is going to happen when I go outside? What will be the thing? And the thing is that I left. I got overseas. My first experience was in France, in Montpellier. This is my first experience with snow. You can see almost no snow here. That was my first experience. Montpellier is in the south of France. I was in the Institute of Cancer Research in Montpellier. And the good thing here is that I really started to see I'm kind of okay. Brazil have a totally different system here. I was already in my second year of PhD. At that point in time, I already have 6 or 7 years of experience of research. And I saw all these students arriving in the PhD really, really green. And like, yeah, I'm kind of fine. I'm good. I'm okay in Brazil. I'm good in Brazil. I'm good here too. So, people are people, good people, nice people, bad people, dumb people, smart people, all over the world. And I was okay there, and I was psyching myself and having very good experience. And as things goes, and this happening like already on my postdoc here, I had the chance of work with NASA, and I took it. For God's sake, I saw the train and I entered it and I did my best. And I was quite successful. I was talking with people from like Harvard and all other like big universities in Brazil, and talk with NASA. And I was again very grateful that NASA believed on me. I was given ideas, and the idea was discussed, and although sometimes very harshly, they ended up being accepted and proven right to people. And literally, they choose me as their poster boy. I was the poster boy of the project. I was like going to conferences. After that, they told my story as a success story. Was quite happy. This thing here was like a wonderful for me, because actually I was a source for article on National Geographic. And this for me was wonderful, because when I was a kid, I used to wake up very early on Saturdays to see the documentaries for National Geographic. And I was a source for it. And like, oh my God, I was so happy. And I was trying to put my mark in the world, not only like see if I was good enough to what outside, but actually try to put my own thing there. So this is me presenting on the Festival of Genomics in London. Because you can see here was packed. I was very happy with that. So I was presenting in the capital of England, and then I was presenting on the capital of the European Union. And then I was teaching in Strasbourg, also very important for the European Union. Then I was invited to teach in Portugal from the International Space University. And this is me visiting the European Space Agency. Last year I was visiting the train at Center for Astronaut Training, also the ESA. And then here's me on Vietnam with some students. So I was around, like the cure of this syndrome was being around, see people and see that, people are people. They're good people, they're bad people, they're dumb people, they're smart people. That's from all different origins. And of course, there's no way for you to do that and not to be influenced back. And here was me in Lisbon. That was a quite emotional time for me, because some of my heritage come exactly from this place. I have, like, of course, a mixed origin, but the Portuguese origin, I'm very sure that at one point in time, a Silveira person took a boat here 400 years ago and ended up in Brazil, and here I was back. I live in Belfast, I live in Charleston for a while, and this was proper snow. I have a goddaughter that the love was mine, and for God's sake, she's 10 years old now. She's so big. I was in San Francisco, I was in Stonehenge, I was in Korea last year, I was in Philadelphia and London. So I was able to go around and see that, yeah, that's good. That's me. That's fine. And I think I was just going to give you some seconds here. That's a very important post that Cell did for me after the publication of our work, where I tell about my experience. Cells was this project called Face of Cell, where they bring attention to ADI, to people who different minorities that are part of their publications. Sorry that this is in Portuguese. This basically saying, don't forget where you came from. I will give you just 20 seconds here to read what it is, and I'm going to pass the order, okay? So, as I tell here, my grandfather, he died without knowing how to read. And from that to this kind of achievement was a long road, not only for me, but for my family. And when my grandma said to me when I was leaving to the US, never forget where you came from, that came with a lot of weight because there was a lot of history there. And I never did, you know. I'm actually going back to Brazil on Easter just to go on her birthday because she made sure she wanted me there for her 80th anniversary. So I think, again, is a good point for transition because I come from one point telling how I was doubting of myself as a young researcher, how I was not sure how I was going to have a stand in the world, and ended up having a bigger influence than I ever thought, a bigger mark than I ever thought. But see, I was expecting things after that. So let's pass to the next point. Now, overcoming post-success imposter syndrome. At this point in time, research-wise, I was on fire. So see, when you published this on November 2020, I was very interesting. Like when I called my family telling that this was accepted, one of my aunts was to choose my mom at that point. She was afraid I was going to have a heart attack. No, she's too agitated. I also was agitated, for God's sake. I was publishing as the first author as the cover of Cell in the special edition to commemorate the 20 years of research of the International Space Station. I still don't know how I did it, but I did. I will give an interview to KRI, what is nice. Our work ended up in Forbes. My alma mater, University of São Paulo, did a whole interview for me and the cover of their journal. One day I woke up after and there was an email of the Italian Institute of Astrophysics. And I was like, I don't even know how they found my email. We ended up in their Spiegel, and as I keep telling, we ended up in 198 journals, news in 32 different countries, but who's counting? And one thing that happened some years after, so this is 2020, this is from 2023, every 10 years, in the United States, the National Academy, that is an organ organized by the United States Congress, they put a group together. Then what they do is they call it the decadal survey. They took the most influential and important articles from the field on the last decade as a base to build the strategy for the next 10 years. And that's me, just here, in the beginning of biological mechanism metabolism, boom. So the work was part of the work that Da Silveira et al., I am Da Silveira, was being recognized as one of the most important works on the decade to be used for the building of the next decade of research and space biology. I was quite happy. I was quite proud and still am. So what I was expecting after a success like that is that, life will be easy. I remember talking with a friend of mine before we got accepted in the research, like, the moment this got on press, the moment it's online, I'm going to go to HR and say, where is my lectureship? At this point, I was a PhD, I was a postdoc, without the problem being as postdoc is. So this was expecting like Aladdin. If you know this music, no, you never had a friend like me. I'm not going to sing this music for you, but it's basically the genie saying, whatever you want is yours. And this is what I was expecting. I was expecting that from that on, I knew that I achieved something that was very difficult. I knew that I achieved something that very few had. And I thought that would guarantee the next step to be smooth and easy, and you be all flowers in the future. And of course, because this is about imposter syndrome, you are aware that this is not what happened. What happens, and I don't need to give much details or names on that, is that I was recognized as a threat. I was, after that publication in my institution, I was threatened with an investigation of anti-ethical behavior because people who wanted to be more part of it in the publication and they were not that much part of it during the work feel threatened by that situation. The person even sent me an email apologizing because the person has to protect his work. not giving details on that, but at this point, I did what I did all the time. I read the whole regulations about what was an unethical behavior and what an investigation would be. I waited for the email. The email never came. But at that point in time, I realized I had to go, and I had to go faster than faster than I realized, sooner than later. It was quite sad for me. Again, I was not expecting that. Academia can be quite toxic, and I was experimenting a lot of toxicity at that point. And I ended up finding a job. Was a temporary job in the beginning, ended up being permanent after a while. It was again, I'm very glad for the opportunity I had there. I'm very glad for the people I met there and for all the things I learned as I was there. But the thing is that I ended up from the university, from the Russo group, with the idea that was happening for me in the future, and that's going to build my group and so on, to a very small university in a small city that's now fighting for their own life, as many small universities in the UK are. A university with very good people, but very low infrastructure for research. They didn't have the ideas or the plan to be big on research. And I was struggling. I was struggling a lot. I have no social life. I have this whole thing that Caroline was feeling about feeling part of it. I simply had not. I could not feel part of the city. I could not feel part. I was not feeling part of the whole thing itself. I didn't feel that I mattered in a lot of ways. Then I remember something that bothered me a lot. There was a statue in front of the university, close enough to the university, and it was a man faking that was like, no, as a kid, it was flying. And it was down there saying, "A man cannot fly." Oh my God, I have to pass that through that statue every single day, and it's really mad with me. And was bad. It was 3 years of feeling basically exiled. I feel myself in exile in this one. I keep trying, and nothing was happening. I kept going to trying a new job, and nothing was happening. There was one university that invited me to 3 different interviews, and at one point, like, you know what, you hire me or you stop invite me to interviews for a job. And my hugest fear, and I don't know if you know this movie. It's an old movie at this point, from 1996. It's a very nice one if you ever had the chance to watch. Is about the band in the 60s. They became quite successful, and they are one-hit wonder. They have one music called "That Thing You Do," and the story is that how they become successful, how they get the best they could for this on the music, and as the music stopped losing their popularity, they were not able to put more things, and how this influenced the whole band. I think it's interesting here, so if you see what the movie is about, in every life, there comes a time where the dream you dream becomes a thing you do. And this is what happened with me. I live the dream. I was aware I was in the highest standards of science that was possible. And after that, nothing. After that, I got to the highest to down, and I was not able to leave. I was not able to get out of the situation. My greatest fear at that point, and at that point in time, I was already doing therapy for a while, and I was talking to my therapist. My greatest fear is that I am a one-hit wonder. I have one hit record, and that's it. Maybe that's it, and maybe I should be happy with it, because some people never do that. There's some people never haven't this one-hit wonder, and I had it. I should be happy. And I was thinking, what I do, what I can do, and I keep trying, I keep not achieving anything. At one point, start to be very difficult, because I was expecting at that point in my career to be achieving things, to be able to have the jobs I want to have, and I was not able. So what I did after that is that I'm a very hard head, a very, very hard head. And as you can see, I love movies. So I remember advice from a very, very interesting movie, when life goes you down, what you have going to do. And I'm again not going to sing for you, but hopefully you are. And the second was the strategy for the Alcoholics Anonymous, forget the name now. That's one day at a time. I think this is like a very interesting. So I was doing as best as I could, one day at a time. And I keep doing as best as I could, as much as I could, for as long as I could. But the point is that I was really thinking I was already being very, very down at that point. In 2022, I was able to publish, let's get back to this slide, because this is an evolution, the first slide. This is literally a slide that comes from my job interview here at Salford. And I was telling here is that this is me. But this Vici et al. Is my first article as a supervisor. First ever was a supervisor. And this was being also considered one of the most influent works in the last 10 years. And I was telling them that this showed that I can do research, but this shows that I can teach. So even if the worst kind of a scenario, I was able to deliver. And then this opportunity came. And I was able to get the job. And at that point, I was already thinking, if nothing happens until December, I'm gone. I don't care. I'm back to Brazil, back to my family. I'm going to be employed. I can have that there with my people, with my family, with my food. But I ended up getting this job. And after that, things start to get better. I like Manchester a lot. I have much more social life here. I like the people here. I like the job. There's giving me a lot of opportunities. And this is the last slide, because I don't want to pass the impression that it was just time that solved my problems. I really liked The Last of Us again. And there was a point where they're talking, and Joe was talking about their problems, and Ellie answered him no. So I time heal our wounds, I guess. And he answered it was not time that did it. Of course, in this case, he means her. In my case, it was a combination of things. Was being a hard head and keep trying if I was not feeling to keep trying. Was having help and accepting help. I have a lot of help here. And even if I didn't got the support where I thought I would have the support, even when I feel betrayed by the people who I thought was going to help me in the beginning, I have a lot of people who showed up to help me that I was not expecting. I even talked to my blind manager yesterday how I was quite happy that she was able to see something on me when I was a really difficult part of my life. And the point is, you have to keep trying. You have to show these people that, you try to put me down, but that's on you, that's not on me. And it was, of course, a lot of this was much more difficult by the case that I am an immigrant. We don't have time to discuss that. But if I have any advice for that, and for whatever it's worth, keep trying. And at one point, when there is a chance, take it. And I think with that, I thank you all for your attention. And let's see if there's any questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you both so much for speaking today. We are so lucky at the University of Salford to have you both here. And I'm really proud to be able to share you with the rest of the world. So it's been great. So I know that there are several questions that have come up in the chat and through some other channels. So just bear with me whilst I manage all my different devices. So we have a question here, or a comment. Really glad to see us being encouraged to reflect on systemic oppression and low levels of external validation when considering imposter feelings. Does anyone wish to comment on that? Caroline, Willian? Oh, I can't hear Caroline. One sec. There we go.
Okay, I can take this one then just for a moment before I go. This is very important. As I said, part of my experience after of the bad things that happened with me, of not being validated by the person who was responsible for me at that time, was realizing that the person didn't want to validate me because the person didn't want to lose me. The person wanted me to be working under the person forever. So it's not that the person have not recognized my value. The person had recognized my value, but they want me to recognize my value. So that's something that you have to see too. You have to go around and ask different people, and also try to trust more in yourself.
Yeah, and for me, it's really important. I think there's a history with how people experience racism as well, about them being made the problem. It's your problem. It's rather than reflecting on the reality of the situation. I think there's a temptation there with the imposter phenomenon as well. It's like, this is your thing that you have to deal with, when actually it might be a very valid response to what's happening in your professional life. So yeah, I think it's really important that that's a part of the consideration.
So can I just follow up on that then? What role do you think that leadership or organizational culture has in reducing these imposter feelings? Do you think that they should have a big role, or?
Yeah, I guess that kind of boils down to the sense of belonging, doesn't it? And we know that's a massive problem for a lot of people in the workplace, not feeling like they belong, not feeling welcome, having to code switch a lot in order to kind of survive and get by. So yeah, it's absolutely the responsibility of organizations, whether they see it that way. That my sense is that that's not such a known thing, but that's my personal opinion. Yes.
Yeah. Great. And we've got, thanks there for a thought-provoking talk, and you've given people lots to think about. So yeah, I absolutely agree. I've taken so many notes. So then we have, when I feel like an imposter, whose standards am I measuring myself against, and are they realistic?
Oh, that's a great question, isn't it? And that's absolutely the kind of, yeah, I love that. It's like that question of like, what's enough? Like, when will I have achieved enough? So I think exploring that kind of question is fantastic, because it might be that you've got inside of you a set of standards that don't actually align with your real self and your core values, but have been kind of imported by parents or society or other powerful voices in your history. Yeah, I love that question.
Yeah,
that's something to explore with yourself, your friends, your therapist.
Yeah, I just want to make the point here on that others, like comparing and the standards can be quite dangerous. We compare to what, and comparing to others is always complicated. You don't know the other person's story. You don't know how difficult it was for them or how easy it was for them. Academically speaking, it's always more difficult for women to do things and for immigrants to do things. When I arrived here, I have to rebuild my whole network. I have to start to learn how the system works. I knew how the system works back in Brazil. I had my network back in Brazil. People knew about my university back in Brazil. Was here, I have to start from zero twice. So having that in mind, is don't judge yourself by the success of others. Judge yourself by yourself. I'm better today than I was yesterday. I'm going the direction I want to be. It took me 3 years to be in the position that I hope to be 4 years ago. So, it's different people and different stories.
That's great. We've got another one. Awesome. What an incredible experience. Thanks for sharing. And I absolutely echo that. So then we've got a question for Willian. Such an inspiring talk. I'd love to hear more your advice for people who arrive into a new country. How do you find your space and people?
Whoa. I think I'm still learning that. I'm still learning how to do that. First thing, I love Manchester. Since I moved here, it's a city that I'm feeling much more welcome than it was in smaller cities in the UK. It's not that people were not good. It's not that. They're very friendly and everything. It's just that it was much more difficult to find my people there. And it was so much easier to see that I was not from there. where in Manchester, I'm just one of the crowd and just really welcome, so on. I think keep looking is part of it. As I said, after a while, I'm much better now. But when I was back in my older city, at one point I started looking because it was so difficult for me to find that I didn't have the mental energy to keep trying and to keep failing. And to having support on that's important. I think as a man, and as a man from South America, a quite macho society, asking for help is a lot of times seen as a weakness. Like realizing you need help, asking for help, and accepting help is good. And not doubting that the people being nice for you is because they like you. That's something. Why are people being nice to me? I'm not some of that anymore. So that's part two. But there are people out there that aligns with you, and you have to find them.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask Caroline 2 very quick fire questions with a minute to respond to these. So the first one we can see, I wonder how much has life outside of the place where you work been crucial to feeling? And the second one is, how important is what we do outside of work critical to moving beyond imposter? And it says syndrome, but I'm going to adapt to feeling. So if you could do that in a minute, Caroline, that would be great.
Yeah, I think, well, we're not just our professional selves, are we? So I think whatever you can do to learn about who you are, what your core values are, and how they overlap with your professional life as much as possible. That's been really important for me in terms of being able to bring more of myself into my work, feeling that kind of contentedness and authenticity. What was the second question? I've forgotten it already. 10 seconds.
How much has life outside the place where you work been crucial to feeling?
Yeah, I think really important. It's really important having support networks, having places where you do feel like you belong, having places where you feel like you're accepted. All that stuff resources you to be able to, withstand difficulties in the workplace, and it gives you the confidence and the tools to kind of practice being more of your authentic self at work, if that's available to you.
So that brings me to my final 30 seconds to thank you both again. I know there'll be more questions that come through as we view the recording. And for those who are accessing via the recording, please do add your thoughts and messages to the Padlet that was shown throughout this presentation. Our next Catalyst conversation is on the 27th of January from 1 p.m. with Dr. Sawat Howe, who will be talking about intellectual property and research impact. It's been fabulous to have you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.